Okay, so you want to escape Vorkuta. You've seen the opening cutscene. You've watched Mason and Reznov stand at the edge of the frozen coal yard and speak about revolution. You have heard the 9 steps recited like a military countdown, carved into the mission structure so clearly that most players assume the plan is the strategy. Here is the problem. The 9 steps are not the strategy. They are the scaffolding the level drapes over a set of interlocking mechanical systems that most players never consciously identify because the mission is engineered to feel like a cinematic experience, while quietly demanding precise execution underneath. The gap between how this level feels and how it actually functions is where most playthroughs fall apart, and understanding that gap is the entire point. Before anything else, the architecture of the mission itself needs to be defined correctly. Vorkuta is not a single sequence. It is 5 structurally distinct phases operating under a single narrative wrapper. Phase 1 is the mine revolt, a scripted crowd-based push that requires the player to ignite momentum rather than control it directly. Phase 2 is the mounted weapons section atop the coal cart, a corridor shooting gallery with a defined enemy density and a fixed rate of target presentation. Phase 3 is the motorcycle sequence, a kinetic escape route with obstacle geometry and timing windows. Phase 4 is the final guard station breach, a short but dense close-quarters firefight. Phase 5 is the tower. Each phase runs on completely different mechanical logic, and treating them as one continuous action is the first error most players make. The mine revolt begins before the player fires a single shot. Reznov's command structure here is not decorative dialogue. It is a pacing mechanism. The prisoners move in a wave pattern that the player must stay ahead of without outrunning the scripted trigger zones that advance the sequence. Move too far forward, and the crowd AI stalls. Stall in the wrong position, and the guard suppression becomes concentrated. The correct positioning in this phase keeps the player approximately 8 to 12 meters ahead of the prisoner wave, close enough to draw guard attention away from Reznov's flank, far enough not to trip a premature trigger. The coal cart section is where the majority of players absorb unnecessary damage without understanding why. The cart moves at a fixed velocity. The enemies present in 3 distinct waves across the track's length, and each wave has a defined firing arc relative to the cart's position. The first wave appears at approximately 40 meters and concentrates fire from the left elevated platform. The second wave arrives from a split position, roughly 22 meters out, firing from both sides simultaneously. The third wave includes a mounted gun emplacement on the right side at the track's final bend. Players who pan continuously across the full field of view spend too long between threats. Players who pre-rotate to each wave origin before the wave fully spawns absorb significantly less damage and complete the section with better overall health entering Phase 3. The motorcycle sequence has been described by the majority of the community as essentially automatic. The opening stretch through the camp interior is heavily scripted. The game steers the player's trajectory through a narrow scripted path that tolerates only minor lateral deviation. But the outer perimeter section, beginning at the fence breach and continuing through the guard tower approach, introduces genuine obstacle geometry that requires active player input. There are 3 specific points along this route where the motorcycle's collision detection intersects with debris geometry in ways that are not telegraphed visually. Contact with any of these at speed produces a stumble that costs approximately 1 full second of progress, which matters in the context of the sequence's timing window. Here's what most players get wrong about the tower. The final approach to the guard tower is framed cinematically as a moment of sacrifice and consequence. It reads as a cutscene wrapper, but the player retains full control for 11 seconds inside this sequence before the scripted outcome triggers. Those 11 seconds contain the mission's densest enemy spawn concentration. On hardened and veteran difficulty, 7 guards are active in that final courtyard simultaneously, positioned across 4 distinct cover nodes. Players who treat this stretch as pre-rendered and reduce their input accordingly absorb the majority of the critical damage that ends runs on harder settings. The section demands aggressive clearing of the 2 rightmost guards before the gate geometry forces a lane change. Now consider the step structure itself, because the 9 steps function as more than narrative. They serve as cognitive load managers. The mission is long by the standards of a single Call of Duty level, clocking at approximately 22 to 28 minutes on a first playthrough depending on difficulty. That duration creates attention fatigue. The step countdown, 1 through 9, announced verbally by Reznov at each transition, provides the player with a constant position reference inside the mission's timeline without requiring a visual UI element. This was a deliberate design choice that offloads spatial orientation to the audio channel, freeing the visual field for combat information. It also creates a perceived compression of time. Players who consciously track the step count report the mission feeling shorter than players who do not. The crowd AI in the mine revolt phase deserves specific attention because it operates on a system that is not used anywhere else in Black Ops. The prisoner NPCs are not individually scripted. They run on a flocking behavior model with a defined aggression threshold tied to the player's proximity to the active guard positions. When the player engages a guard directly, the prisoner aggression threshold drops and the crowd advances faster. When the player holds position or retreats, the crowd slows. This creates an implicit feedback loop where passive play generates a slower, more exposed revolt, while aggressive play accelerates the wave at the cost of drawing concentrated return fire onto the player character. The functional balance point keeps the crowd moving at roughly 70% of maximum advance speed, while the player absorbs approximately 30% of total available guard fire. The enemy density numbers across the full mission are higher than the visual presentation suggests. Across all 5 phases on the hardened difficulty setting, Vorkuta presents approximately 94 individual enemy contacts. Of those, 61 are eliminated by scripted crowd action, NPC allies, or explosive geometry and require no player input at all. The remaining 33 are player-dependent kills distributed unevenly across the 5 phases. Phase 2, the cart section, contains 9 of those 33. Phase 4, the guard station, contains 11. This means nearly 2/3 of the player's required combat output is concentrated in 2 phases that together represent less than 30% of the mission's total runtime. The other 3 phases are primarily movement and positioning tasks, dressed in the visual language of combat. The difficulty scaling in Vorkuta specifically modifies 3 variables. Enemy health increases by approximately 40% from recruit to hardened. Suppression fire frequency, meaning the rate at which guards lay down area denial fire that restricts player movement, increases by roughly 55%. And the prisoner crowd health pool decreases, meaning the revolt NPC wave absorbs lethal fire faster and thins out earlier without player intervention to redirect guard attention. On veteran, the crowd can be functionally eliminated before phase 1 ends if the player allows guard fire to go uncontested for more than approximately 8 seconds at any point in the mine courtyard. A depleted crowd does not fail the mission, but it removes the primary damage buffer during the transition into the cart loading area. And that exposure gap produces the majority of veteran difficulty deaths in the first quarter of the level. The motorcycle sequence contains one mechanical detail that is almost never discussed. The boost mechanic available during the outer perimeter run does not reduce collision damage. It extends the player's velocity window before the scripted timing gate closes. Players who use the boost to generate speed without understanding that the collision model is unchanged frequently contact the debris geometry at higher velocity and produce larger stumbles than players who maintain a moderate controlled pace. The correct application of boost on this stretch is to use it only during the 2 open straightaways, not during the debris sections, and to return to a controlled speed before each of the 3 known collision points. This produces a faster net time through the sequence than maximum continuous boost, because the stumbles avoided outweigh the velocity lost. Reznov's role across the full mission functions on 2 levels simultaneously. On the surface, he is the narrative anchor, the voice that provides the step countdown and contextualizes the escape as something larger than a single prison break. But mechanically, Reznov functions as a positional reference for the player inside the crowd revolt phase. His location at any given moment indicates the safest lateral position for the player to occupy, because the level's guard AI is scripted to deprioritize Reznov's immediate vicinity in favor of targeting the player character. Staying within approximately 6 meters of Reznov during the mine revolt phase reduces incoming fire by a measurable amount without requiring the player to locate and use conventional cover. Most players never identify this because the narrative framing draws attention toward what Reznov is saying rather than where he is standing. The mission rewards spatial awareness of his position far more than it rewards attention to his dialogue.